I never imagined a quiet walk in my neighborhood could turn into the worst moment of my life. There we were, my daughter Emma and I, enjoying the sunshine, her laughter filling the air. She's 8, full of life, but confined to a wheelchair. And then it happened. Out of nowhere, Karen, the notorious HOA president, appeared. At first, I thought she was just upset, but within seconds, she grabbed Emma's wheelchair and started dragging her across the sidewalk. I froze. My heart slammed in my chest. My little girl's screams cut through the air. Neighbors gasped. I ran, shouting, begging her to stop, but she was too strong, too determined. And then, 5 minutes later, just when I thought it couldn't get any worse, someone appeared at the end of the street. Someone I never expected. A Navy SEAL. Calm, commanding, unstoppable. Hey, everyone. Before we dive into the story, I have a quick question for you. Where are you watching from right now? Drop your city name in the comments. I love seeing people from all over come together to watch these real-life stories that are full of suspense, emotion, and unbelievable twists. Now, make sure you hit that subscribe button because today's story is going to take you on an emotional roller coaster. It's about fear, courage, and a moment that could have been a tragedy but turned into something none of us will ever forget. Picture this, a sunny afternoon, a peaceful neighborhood, kids playing, and neighbors chatting, just an ordinary day. That's when the unimaginable happens. My daughter, Emma, who's in a wheelchair, gets dragged by someone who has no right to touch her. The shock, the fear, the helplessness. I froze. Everyone around was stunned. And just when I thought all hope was lost, someone appeared who changed everything in a heartbeat. Someone trained to handle life or death situations. Someone who saw the danger and acted instantly. Before I tell you exactly what happened, I want you to take a moment and imagine being in my shoes, your child in danger, your heart racing, and knowing there's no one to rely on except for a hero arriving at exactly the right time. All right, now that you're ready, let's dive straight into the story. But first, don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you never miss a story that will shock you, touch your heart, and leave you breathless. It started as the kind of afternoon you wish could last forever. The sun was shining, birds were singing, and the neighborhood was alive with the usual suburban buzz. Kids rode their bikes up and down the streets, neighbors watered their lawns, and the scent of freshly cut grass filled the air. I had taken my daughter, Emma, out for a walk. She's 8, full of energy, full of life, but she's in a wheelchair. Emma doesn't let it define her. She smiles at everyone she meets, jokes with the mailman, and waves to the neighborhood kids. And on that particular day, she was in high spirits, laughing as I pushed her gently along the sidewalk. Everything seemed perfectly ordinary. Too ordinary, maybe. I let Emma roll ahead a little, letting her feel the freedom she always craved. Her laughter echoed down the street, a sound that usually warmed my heart, but that day made me feel vulnerable, like it was a fragile bubble floating in the air. And then I heard it, the click of high heels against concrete. Slow, deliberate, angry. I turned, and there she was, Karen, the HOA president. A woman everyone in the neighborhood had heard about, controlling, relentless, the type who believed rules mattered more than people. I'd had disagreements with her before, mostly minor stuff, lawn heights, mailbox decorations, petty nonsense, but nothing that would prepare me for what was about to happen. Her eyes locked on Emma's wheelchair. At first, I thought she might just be angry about some minor violation, but then she lunged forward, grabbing the wheelchair. My stomach dropped. My mind froze. Karen, let go of her. I screamed. My voice cracked. I couldn't move fast enough. Time slowed. The world seemed to narrow down to just 3 people, Emma, Karen, and me. Emma's eyes widened in shock. She didn't understand why this stranger, someone who was supposed to maintain rules, was now a threat to her safety. She tried to scream, but the sound caught in her throat as Karen yanked the wheelchair backward, dragging my daughter across the sidewalk. I ran. I ran faster than I ever thought I could. My hands reached for Emma, for the wheelchair, anything to stop this nightmare from unfolding. Neighbors gasped, some frozen, some on the phone dialing 911. But I couldn't wait. Every second felt like a lifetime. My daughter's safety was in jeopardy, and the world had slowed to a crawl around us. Karen's grip was iron. She was strong, stubborn, and terrifyingly determined. I couldn't believe what was happening. How could someone be so cruel? So heartless? The anger, the disbelief, the panic all collided inside me. I felt powerless, but I refused to give up. "Let her go, Karen. Now!" I yelled, my voice echoing down the street. Some neighbors tried to intervene. One man stepped in, his hands reaching to grab Karen's arms. She shoved him back with shocking strength. Emma's face was pale, her eyes wide with fear, tears streaming down her cheeks. I kept running, my lungs burning, trying to close the distance between us. I could feel every second ticking by like a countdown to something terrible. Then, for a brief, terrifying moment, Karen's grip faltered. I thought maybe I could finally pull Emma free. But she tightened her hold, yanking harder. The wheelchair tipped dangerously. My heart stopped. I screamed louder, and it felt like the whole world was silent except for my panic. Neighbors were now shouting, some crying, some frozen in shock. I could hear the faint whirring of a phone camera. Someone was recording this, but there was no time for hesitation. Every second mattered. My daughter's safety depended on me, and yet I felt completely helpless. 5 minutes passed, though it felt like hours. 5 minutes of pure terror. 5 minutes where the world seemed to have abandoned us. And then it happened. A voice, low, deep, calm, and commanding. "Step back." It wasn't a shout. It wasn't panic. It was authority in its purest form. Karen froze. So did the neighbors. My blood raced, unsure whether this new presence would help or escalate things further. I squinted down the street and saw him. A man walking with deliberate, measured steps. Not running. Not panicked. Just walking. Tall. Strong. Calm. His presence alone made Karen hesitate. His eyes were locked on hers, steady and unyielding. Something about him radiated control, discipline, and a quiet power that I had never seen before. And in that moment, I realized he wasn't just anyone. He was trained. He knew exactly how to handle situations like this. Emma's tears fell freely now, her hands gripping mine as I tried to calm her. I couldn't speak. I could barely breathe. My daughter, my precious little girl, had been in danger, and now, it seemed, someone had arrived to protect her. Time slowed again, but this time, differently. This time, there was hope. The tension hung in the air, thick and suffocating. Karen's face twisted with anger and confusion, unsure how to respond to this unexpected intervention. I watched frozen as the man continued to approach. Every step seemed deliberate, calculated. There was no hesitation, no fear, just a silent promise that he was here to protect. And for the first time in 5 minutes, I felt a flicker of hope. The street had transformed from a peaceful suburban scene into a chaos of disbelief and horror in a matter of seconds. Neighbors who had been casually tending to their lawns or chatting at their mailboxes froze mid-action. Some pulled out their phones to call 911, their fingers shaking, their voices cracking as they tried to explain what was happening. Others simply stood rooted to the spot, unable to move or process the scene unfolding before them. I was running, heart pounding, every muscle in my body screaming for me to reach Emma before it was too late. My voice rang through the street, "Let go of her. Stop right now." But Karen's grip was unyielding. Her face was red, her jaw tight, eyes wild with fury. She wasn't just angry, she was relentless, almost frighteningly so. The wheelchair tipped slightly, and I flinched, fearing Emma would fall. She clung to me as tightly as she could, her small hands gripping my arms, her tears wet against my skin. "Mom, it hurts, she whimpered, her voice trembling. Every word pierced me like a knife. I wanted to reach her, to pull her into my arms, but Karen's strength and determination kept her just out of reach. A neighbor tried to intervene, stepping between Karen and the wheelchair. "Hey, stop that right now," he shouted. Karen spun toward him, shoving him hard enough that he stumbled back, hitting the curb. The impact didn't deter her. If anything, it made her grip tighter, dragging Emma faster. Time seemed to stretch endlessly. Seconds felt like minutes, minutes like hours. My vision blurred with panic and adrenaline, my brain unable to fully process the reality of what was happening. The peaceful neighborhood, the quiet streets, the sun shining overhead, all of it felt like it belonged to another world, one where danger didn't exist. Then came the first whispers. From across the street, a voice called out, calm but firm, "Step back." I froze mid-stride. Karen froze, her grip faltering for a fraction of a second. Every neighbor turned to see where the voice had come from. And that's when I saw him. At the far end of the street, a man was walking toward us. Not running, not panicked, just walking with an impossible calm. But the moment he locked eyes on Karen, her bravado seemed to crumble. There was authority in his gaze, a silent command that demanded respect and obedience. I could barely believe it. The man radiated power, discipline, and quiet control. He didn't need to yell. He didn't need to threaten. His presence alone altered the energy in the air. It was as if the entire neighborhood collectively exhaled, sensing that this stranger was someone who could handle what no one else dared to confront. Meanwhile, Emma was trembling in her wheelchair, still in Karen's grasp. Her small body shook, and her cries grew louder. My panic surged, but the sight of this man gave me a sliver of hope I hadn't felt in those terrifying minutes. Could he save her? Karen's face twisted in confusion. Her eyes darted from me to Emma, to the approaching man. She seemed to hesitate, unsure whether to continue or retreat. I noticed the tension in her shoulders, the way her hands gripped the wheelchair with a sudden uncertainty. This wasn't how she had planned it. She had always been confident, in control, but this presence changed everything. Neighbors were whispering now, some pointing, some holding their phones, but no longer recording. They were watching, collectively holding their breath. The man continued walking, slow and deliberate, his steps unhurried but undeniably purposeful. Every inch he closed seemed to shift the balance of power on the street. I ran to Emma, reaching for her hand, trying to reassure her. "It's okay, baby, it's okay," I whispered, my own voice shaking. She clung to me, and for a brief moment, I thought maybe we could pull her free ourselves. But Karen's grip was iron. She was determined not to let go. And then, in a move that stunned everyone watching, the man stopped just a few feet away from Karen. He stood tall, shoulders squared, eyes locked on her, and said again, with a calm but commanding tone, "Step back. Now." It wasn't a threat. It wasn't a warning. It was an order. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then Karen's hands trembled slightly. Her confident smirk faltered. She glanced around, realizing that everyone was watching. The neighbors, who had been paralyzed by fear moments before, now seemed to draw strength from this stranger's presence. Whispers of "Who is that?" and "I think he's military" rippled through the crowd. And then, almost imperceptibly, Karen's grip on Emma's wheelchair loosened. She was hesitant, uncertain, powerless under the weight of authority she hadn't anticipated. Emma's tiny body shivered with relief, though she didn't fully understand what was happening. I could feel the adrenaline leaving my body slowly, replaced by a cautious hope. I stayed close to Emma, holding her protectively as the man continued to assert his presence. He didn't move forward aggressively. He didn't need to. His calm confidence was enough to make Karen step back, slowly releasing Emma from her grip. Neighbors began murmuring words of relief. Some were crying, some were shaking, all of them astonished. This quiet, calm figure had entered a chaotic scene and turned it completely upside down. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, I allowed myself to breathe, but there was still tension in the air. Karen hadn't gone yet, and the danger wasn't fully over. The man, clearly someone trained to handle life-or-death situations, stood like a shield between her and Emma. Every neighbor instinctively took a step back, letting him control the situation. I clutched Emma close, tears streaming down both of our faces. "It's okay, baby," I whispered. "You're safe now." The street was silent except for our heavy breathing, the occasional murmur of neighbors, and the distant sound of sirens approaching. But in that silence, I realized something profound. Courage doesn't always roar. Sometimes it walks calmly down the street, steps deliberate, and presence alone changes everything. In that moment, the impossible became real. My daughter, moments ago in danger, was now safe, and I knew that the next few minutes would determine not just our immediate safety, but how the rest of this terrifying day would unfold. The moment seemed frozen in time. Karen had released her iron grip on Emma's wheelchair, but she didn't retreat. She stood rigid, her face twisted with confusion and rage, unsure how to respond to the man who had just appeared. Neighbors, still frozen in awe, murmured among themselves, speculating about who he could be. The man's eyes never left Karen. There was no fear, no hesitation, only calm, focused precision. Every step he took was deliberate, controlled, and somehow commanding. Even from a distance, I could feel the authority radiating off him, a presence so powerful that it made the air itself feel heavier, charged with anticipation. I clutched Emma close, my arms around her small body. She was trembling, her eyes wide with fear and relief. "Mom, who is he?" she whispered. I shook my head, unable to answer. I didn't know, but I knew one thing. He was here to protect us. He stopped about 10 feet from Karen, and with a single steady voice, he said, "Step back." Karen's defiance faltered for a moment. Her lips pressed into a thin line. She shifted from foot to foot, suddenly unsure. The crowd of neighbors began to murmur louder. Some whispered, "Is he military? Navy SEAL?" Others speculated wildly, but the man didn't speak again. He didn't need to. His calm presence and piercing gaze did all the talking. Then, in a move that seemed almost effortless, he stepped forward, closing the distance between him and Karen. She flinched. Her eyes darted around, seeking an escape route, but the street was lined with neighbors, all watching silently. She realized she had no support, no way to continue her assault. She had misjudged the situation entirely. I finally gathered enough courage to speak, my voice shaking. "Please, just let her go. She's only a child. You can't do this." Karen shot me a glare, but it lacked conviction. She was beginning to understand that she had lost control. The man's presence had shifted the balance entirely. He knelt slightly, bringing himself closer to Emma's eye level. His movement was deliberate, but gentle, as if reassuring her without words. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice calm and steady. Emma nodded, clinging to my shoulder, her body trembling but safe. The real confrontation was about to begin. The man stood tall again, his posture rigid but relaxed. "You have no right to touch her," he said firmly. "Let her go, or authorities will be involved immediately." Karen opened her mouth to protest, to argue, but the confidence and authority emanating from this man made her falter. Her words caught in her throat. She realized she had overstepped, that she had miscalculated not just the situation, but the courage and capability of the person confronting her. For the first time, the absurdity of the situation hit me. This wasn't just a random intervention. This man had training. Intense, disciplined, precise training. His eyes, his voice, his calm movements, all pointed to one thing. He was someone who could handle danger without hesitation, someone who knew exactly how to protect the vulnerable. Neighbors began to step back, giving him space. Phones were lowered. Cameras stopped recording. There was nothing left to do but watch as the drama unfolded. Every eye was on him, and the tension in the street was palpable. Karen's shoulders slumped slightly. She was cornered, not physically but psychologically. Her anger was still there, but it lacked force. The sheer authority of this man had dismantled her, leaving her exposed and powerless. He finally approached the wheelchair fully, standing close enough to shield Emma, but not threatening her. "You're safe now," he said, addressing both me and my daughter. The words, though simple, carried a weight of reassurance I hadn't felt in what felt like hours. Emma's eyes lit up with relief. She clung to me tighter, her small hands gripping my arms. I couldn't speak. I could only nod, my body trembling from adrenaline and emotion. The man turned his attention back to Karen. "You need to leave," he said firmly. "Now, before law enforcement arrives, and before anyone else gets hurt. You have no right to touch her, ever." Karen tried to argue. She stammered, her words frantic, her voice rising. But it was useless. The calm, unshakable presence of this stranger left her no room to maneuver. She realized she was completely outmatched, not physically, but mentally, emotionally, and morally. Finally, with a huff of frustration, she stepped back. The crowd exhaled collectively, a wave of relief washing over the street. Emma was safe, and for the first time in what felt like an eternity, I allowed myself to breathe. But the man wasn't done. He scanned the area, ensuring that no one else posed a threat. His eyes were sharp, assessing, meticulous. Then he knelt again, looking directly at Emma. "Are you really okay?" he asked. She nodded again, this time with a faint smile. I felt a wave of gratitude and awe. This wasn't just a random stranger stepping in. This was a trained protector, someone who understood danger in its purest form and acted without hesitation. My daughter, moments ago in peril, was now safe in my arms. As the sound of approaching sirens reached the street, signaling that authorities were on the way, the man finally stepped back. He gave me a brief nod, a silent acknowledgement that the immediate threat had been neutralized. Then, without another word, he blended into the background, almost as if he had never been there. I held Emma close, tears streaming down both of our faces. The neighborhood was buzzing with whispers, questions, and awe. "Who was that?" someone asked. "A Navy SEAL," another neighbor guessed, and I knew they were right. The precision, calmness, and authority could only come from someone with extraordinary training. In those terrifying moments, I realized something profound. Courage doesn't always roar. Sometimes, it walks calmly down a suburban street, assesses the situation, and steps in with authority that cannot be challenged. Sometimes, heroes appear when you least expect them, and change everything in an instant. The street was tense, but the immediate danger had passed. Emma was clinging to me, still trembling, while the man who had just intervened stood like a guardian between us and Karen. The air was thick with disbelief and whispers. Neighbors had slowly started to step closer, but nobody dared interfere. They didn't need to. The authority emanating from the stranger was enough to command the scene. Karen's face was red with fury, but there was an unmistakable crack in her confidence. She had been used to control, used to bullying her way through minor disputes in the neighborhood. But this situation was different. She realized, finally, that her actions had consequences far beyond petty HOA disagreements. The man, calm and deliberate, took one step closer. "You need to leave now," he said firmly, his voice echoing across the street. "Before law enforcement arrives. You have no right to touch her, ever." Karen's lips trembled. I was just enforcing the rules," she stammered. Her argument sounded feeble, almost ridiculous against the calm certainty of this protector. The neighbors around us exchanged skeptical glances. The truth was becoming clear. Her anger wasn't personal, it was cruelly bureaucratic. She had a sense of superiority, a belief that she could dictate other people's lives through petty rules. But in this moment, she was exposed. "You call that enforcement?" one neighbor called out. "Dragging a child across the sidewalk? Really?" Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. Karen's face fell. The weight of public scrutiny, combined with the man's unwavering presence, was unraveling her. The sound of sirens grew louder. Relief mixed with tension as the local police pulled up to the scene. Officers jumped out, surveying the situation. The man who had saved Emma stepped aside, allowing the authorities to take control. He gave me a nod, reassuring, silent, and then focused on Karen. The officers quickly approached her, asking for an explanation. Karen's defenses crumbled. She muttered about rules and guidelines, but her voice lacked conviction. It was clear to everyone present that this had escalated far beyond anything reasonable. The officers began documenting her actions, noting Emma's account, the witness statements, and the video evidence captured by neighbors. I clutched Emma tighter. Her little body was still shaking, but I could feel her breathing becoming steadier. She looked up at me, eyes wide, and whispered, "Mom, he saved me." I nodded, unable to speak, tears streaming down my face. The enormity of what had just happened was overwhelming. Then the man, my unexpected hero, finally spoke directly to me. "She's safe," he said quietly. "The authorities will handle it from here. Make sure she's protected, and don't let anyone intimidate you again." His words, simple as they were, carried a weight of authority and care that reassured me more than anything else could. The police began asking questions, taking statements, and ensuring that Emma was unharmed. Karen was led away, still muttering excuses, but powerless. Her plan had completely unraveled in the face of authority and truth. Neighbors slowly approached, expressing relief, admiration, and curiosity about the man who had intervened. It was then that he revealed a detail I never expected. Standing back, calm but watchful, he spoke, "I knew your family. Your brother and I served together in the Navy. I recognized the family from our operations. When I saw your daughter in danger, I couldn't stay away. My heart skipped a beat. My brother, who had passed away years ago, had been a Navy SEAL. And this man, this calm, authoritative presence, had known him. He had seen the courage, the values, the resilience that ran in our family. And when Emma was in danger, he acted. Not as a neighbor, not as a random passerby, but as someone connected to my family's legacy of service and protection. Tears streamed down my face as I realized the gravity of the situation. Emma had been moments away from serious harm, and yet fate had intervened in the form of someone trained, disciplined, and courageous. He hadn't hesitated. He hadn't questioned whether to act. He just did. The neighborhood slowly returned to normal, though the memory of those terrifying minutes lingered like a shadow. Conversations buzzed about what had happened, with neighbors still whispering about the calm, imposing figure who had arrived at exactly the right moment. I knelt beside Emma, holding her hands, and felt her tiny fingers gripping mine tightly. "You're safe now," I whispered. Her tears had begun to subside, replaced with a mixture of relief and lingering fear. "I was so scared, Mom," she murmured. I hugged her close, my own fear melting away in the warmth of this moment. The man stayed nearby until the police confirmed everything was under control. When he finally turned to leave, he gave me one last nod. "Take care of her," he said simply, and with that he walked away, disappearing into the neighborhood like a guardian angel who had never been there. I watched him go, my mind racing. The events of the past hour felt surreal, like something out of a movie. But the reality was undeniable. My daughter had been in danger, and a hero had shown up when we needed him most. The lessons were clear. Cruelty could appear anywhere, even in a quiet suburban neighborhood. But so could courage in the most unexpected forms. And the revelation about our family connection made it all the more profound. This wasn't random chance. It was fate, a reminder that our loved ones and the bonds we form can extend into the most critical moments of our lives. As the police wrapped up, neighbors began to disperse, still talking about what had happened, still shaking their heads in disbelief. Emma and I slowly made our way home, holding hands, hearts still racing, but finally safe. That day would leave scars, yes, but it would also leave lessons about courage, vigilance, and the unexpected heroes who can appear when you least expect them. And for Emma, it would be a memory of terror transformed into the ultimate relief, the moment she was protected, loved, and saved by someone who didn't hesitate to step in when it mattered most. After the police left and Karen was taken away, the neighborhood slowly returned to a semblance of normalcy. The sidewalks were quiet again, but the air remained thick with the tension of what had just unfolded. I sat on the curb with Emma, holding her close, her small body trembling slightly even though she was now safe. I tried to soothe her, brushing her hair back gently. "It's over, baby," I whispered. "You're safe. I promise." Emma clung to me, but her eyes were still wide, filled with questions and confusion. "Mom, who was he?" she asked, her voice soft but insistent. I didn't know how to answer at first. He wasn't just a stranger who had happened to be there. No, he was someone with deep training, someone who had stepped into our lives at exactly the right moment. But there was something more, something I didn't fully understand yet. I turned to the man who was now standing a few feet away, calm and watchful, as if ensuring that we truly were safe before departing. He approached me, his expression serious but gentle. "You don't know me," he began, "but I know you and your family." I blinked, confused. "I'm sorry, do I know you?" I asked cautiously. He shook his head. "No, not in the usual sense. But I knew your brother." My heart skipped a beat. My brother, the brother I had lost years ago, the one who had been a Navy SEAL, who had always carried himself with quiet courage. My voice caught. "My brother, what do you mean?" He explained slowly, carefully. He had served alongside my brother on several classified missions. He had known him not just as a comrade, but as a man of integrity, bravery, and unwavering dedication. And when he saw Emma in danger, something in him recognized the same courage, the same spirit running through our family. That recognition, he said, was what compelled him to act. I felt tears sting my eyes. Emma, still clinging to me, looked up curiously. "Mom, he knew Uncle Jake," she whispered. My throat tightened. "Yes, baby, he did," I said softly. "And he came because he knew that when our family is in danger, someone like him will step in to help." The depth of that revelation hit me harder than the fear I had just endured. This wasn't a random act of heroism. It was something connected to our family's legacy, something almost fated. The man had seen the courage in our bloodline, had recognized the stakes, and had stepped in without hesitation. I felt a mix of awe, gratitude, and disbelief. Here was a person who didn't know me, yet he acted with absolute certainty, skill, and care. And the fact that he had a personal connection, however indirect, made it all the more profound. Emma, slowly calming, looked at him with wide eyes. Did you save me?" she asked softly. The man knelt slightly to her level, keeping his presence gentle but authoritative. "Yes, I did," he said. "You're safe now." For the first time, a faint smile touched Emma's lips. It was small, tentative, but it was there. Relief washed over me like a tidal wave. My daughter, who had been moments away from danger, was now laughing softly, though still shaken. I held her close, feeling her tiny heartbeat against my chest. He stood again, looking at me with a seriousness that conveyed both responsibility and understanding. "I couldn't stand by," he said quietly. "When I saw her in danger, I acted, because in moments like these, hesitation can cost lives. And I knew, from knowing your family, that I couldn't let that happen." I swallowed hard. There was so much to process: the fear, the gratitude, the realization that our family's legacy of courage had reached out in the form of this stranger, this protector. It was more than coincidence. It was almost as if fate had intervened to ensure Emma's safety. The neighborhood slowly began to stir again. People whispered among themselves, still shocked by the events they had witnessed. Some came over to express relief and admiration, asking questions about who the man was. I simply shook my head, too overwhelmed to explain fully. "He's a guardian," I said softly, and in that moment, it felt like the only way to describe him. Emma, still clinging to me, looked at the street as if expecting him to vanish like a ghost. "Will he go away?" she asked softly, her voice tinged with worry. I smiled faintly, brushing her hair back. "Yes, baby. But remember this: courage and protection exist in many forms. Sometimes heroes appear when you least expect them." That evening, as we returned home, the weight of the day began to settle in. I couldn't stop thinking about the sheer improbability of what had happened. A moment of ordinary life had turned into a nightmare, and yet, in the very darkest moment, a hero appeared. Not randomly, not by coincidence, but because he understood the stakes, because he recognized the courage in our family, and because he chose to act. Emma finally drifted off to sleep that night, her small hands clinging to my fingers. I stayed beside her, reflecting on the extraordinary events of the day. I realized that our lives had been touched by someone who represented everything our family stood for: strength, courage, integrity, and selfless action. The emotional twist of that realization settled deep in my heart. Emma's safety, Karen's exposure, and the revelation about our connection to this protector were more than just events. They were reminders that bravery and compassion can manifest in the most unexpected ways, and that sometimes our loved ones continue to influence our lives even when they're gone. I finally understood the profound truth. Courage is not always loud, it is not always celebrated, but it exists in moments like these. And the people who embody it, sometimes strangers, sometimes family, sometimes both, can change everything in an instant. As the night grew quiet, I held Emma close and whispered, "We are safe, baby, and there will always be people who protect us, even when we don't see them." She smiled faintly in her sleep, and for the first time since that terrifying afternoon, I allowed myself to hope. The days after that terrifying afternoon were surreal. Our neighborhood slowly returned to its usual rhythm. But for Emma and me, nothing would ever feel quite the same. Every sidewalk, every mailbox, every quiet corner seemed to carry the memory of what had happened. The fear, the helplessness, the raw terror of seeing someone you love in danger. But mixed with that fear was something far stronger: relief, gratitude, and the profound realization that courage and kindness could appear in the most unexpected ways. Emma remained quieter than usual for the first few days. She was still processing the shock, the fear that someone could be so cruel and so reckless, but also the miraculous way a stranger had intervened. Every night she would hug her wheelchair tight and whisper, "Mom, he saved me. He really saved me." I would hold her, my own heart heavy with the memory of those 5 minutes when I had felt utterly powerless. The neighborhood, too, had changed. People who had witnessed the event began to speak more openly about what had happened, about Karen's cruelty, and about the way the man had intervened with calm authority. Conversations that had once revolved around petty disputes and HOA regulations now centered on courage, protection, and standing up for what's right. Some neighbors came to our home to apologize for not stepping in sooner, expressing regret for their inaction. But their words were tempered by the realization that the intervention had arrived at exactly the right time, and that Emma was safe because of the decisive action of someone trained to act in moments of extreme danger. The HOA faced scrutiny. Karen, who had acted out of blind adherence to rules rather than any real concern for safety or fairness, was confronted with consequences she had never anticipated. The local authorities followed through with investigations, and the neighborhood began to take accountability more seriously. It was as if the entire community had been shaken awake, forced to examine the line between authority and cruelty and the way in which bystanders must respond when someone is in danger. Yet for Emma and me, the true hero was not the HOA's disciplinary actions. It was the man who had appeared out of nowhere, calm, precise, and unflinchingly brave. We never learned his full identity, only that he had served with my late brother in the Navy. That connection gave his actions an almost mystical weight. It was a reminder that courage and family bonds can extend far beyond what we see, reaching into the world in ways that protect and inspire. In the weeks that followed, Emma slowly began to return to her usual self. Her laughter returned, quieter at first, but genuine. We took short walks around the neighborhood again, though I held her hand a little tighter and my eyes were more vigilant. But with each day, she grew braver, and I realized that the experience, as harrowing as it was, had also strengthened her resilience. She had faced fear head-on, and she had survived. And in that survival, there was power, courage, and a lesson she would carry for the rest of her life. The experience also changed me. I realized the importance of vigilance, of standing up not just for yourself, but for those who cannot defend themselves. I had been terrified, yes, but I had also witnessed extraordinary courage. I had seen how a single person, confident, trained, and determined, could intervene in a crisis and completely change the outcome. And that lesson stayed with me, a constant reminder that we each have the potential to act when it matters most. Neighbors and friends often asked us about that day, about how Emma was coping, about how I had managed to stay calm. I always said the same thing. Bravery can appear in many forms, sometimes quietly, sometimes suddenly, and sometimes in the form of someone who understands the stakes better than anyone else. And sometimes courage comes from connections you didn't even realize existed, reaching across time and space to protect what matters most. As the weeks turned into months, our community gradually healed. People spoke more kindly, acted more thoughtfully, and looked out for one another in ways they hadn't before. It was as if the event had reminded everyone that our actions, our words, and our decisions carry weight, and that even small choices can have life-altering consequences. For me, the most profound lesson was simple. Never underestimate the power of courage, the strength of love, and the unexpected ways in which protection can manifest. That day, Emma's life had been threatened, but it had also been saved by someone who chose action over hesitation and selflessness over indifference. It was a story of terror, yes, but also one of hope, resilience, and human connection. And that's why I want you to take a moment and reflect. In your own life, in your own neighborhood, who might need you to step in? Who might be facing danger, fear, or injustice without anyone noticing? Courage isn't always about grand gestures or heroic feats. It's often about being aware, being present, and choosing to act when it matters most. So, here's my message to you. Cherish the moments of safety, protect those who cannot protect themselves, and remember that heroes can appear in the most unexpected ways. Emma's story is a reminder that, even in the darkest moments, hope and courage exist. And sometimes they arrive when you least expect them, but exactly when you need them most. If this story moved you, inspired you, or made you think about the importance of standing up for others, then share it. Share it with someone who might need hope. Share it with someone who might need courage. And make sure you subscribe to this channel so you never miss stories that are filled with real-life drama, emotion, and life-changing heroism. Drop a comment below telling me your city. Let's see where everyone is watching from, and let's remind ourselves that courage, heroism, and hope exist everywhere, in every community. Because Emma's story isn't just ours. It's a story for every parent, every child, and every person who needs to be reminded that even in moments of fear and uncertainty, heroes exist. They might be strangers, friends, family, or even people connected to your past in ways you can't imagine. And when they show up, everything can change. If this story touched your heart, gave you chills, or reminded you of the power of courage, then don't keep it to yourself. Share it with someone who needs hope today. Hit that like button to show your support, and make sure to subscribe to the channel so you never miss stories that are full of suspense, real-life heroism, and emotional twists. And I want to hear from you. Comment below your city and let us know where you're watching from. Your voice matters, and it's amazing to see people from all over come together to witness stories that inspire, shock, and remind us what true courage looks like. Remember, heroes can appear when you least expect them, and sometimes they show up just in time to change everything. Stay vigilant, stay kind, and never underestimate the power of stepping in when it matters most.